Welcome, everyone. I'm Rabbi Andrew Ergis, the CEO of Ivrit B'Merkaz. It's my pleasure to be here to support during this session. This is a leadership track session, the Critical Hebrew Teacher Pipeline, effective strategies to recruit new teachers, support current teachers, and strengthen protection. Este es en español también. ¿Tú quieres españoles en interpretations? האם יש אנשים שרוצים את זה בעברית או שרוצים את זה בספרדית? הסדנה הזאת מופיעה בעברית, אבל גם יש תרגום לעברית, גם לצרפתית וגם לעברית. With that, it'll be my pleasure to turn it over to Dr. Esty Gross.
So I'd like to introduce Dr. Sarah Shulkind, is the head of school at Milken Community Schools in Los Angeles, California, a nationally recognized independent Jewish community school with over 750 students from 6th through 12th grade. And before coming to Milken in 2019, Sarah served as the head of school at Sinai Kiva Academy for 7 years, and she served as the middle school director at Milken prior to that. And that's where I've known her since then. She was my principal. She received the National Association of Secondary Schools Dissertation Award for her research on middle level advisory programs. She has published articles in educational leadership, principal leadership in the Middle School Journal. Sarah is the incoming president of the California Association of Independent Schools Board of Directors and serves on the board Camp Alma in Wisconsin, as well as the advisory board for UCLA's Women's Executive Leadership Academy. When do you have time to do all that and still be here? So thank you.
Thank you, Esty. Actually, I think that the story goes that Esty hired me. She was on the hiring committee, so I wouldn't be here without you. And it's my pleasure to introduce Rabbi Marc Wolf. Marc is the current Chief Program and Strategy Officer at Prisma. He has dedicated his career to the importance of Jewish education, and he has a passion for data and knowledge. So at Prisma, he's responsible for measuring the impact of Prisma programming and the services which include knowledge management and internal program learning. Previously, Marc served as the vice president of the East Coast at the Shalom Hartman Institute of North America, and he has also held several leadership roles at JTS, the Jewish Theological Seminary, including vice chancellor, director of community engagement, and chief development officer, where he received his MA in rabbinic ordination. As a lifelong lover of stage, you also might find it interesting to note that he serves on the board of the Playgroup Theater, which is a children's theater company in White Plains, New York. He is the proud day school parent and spouse, and he continues to dedicate his life to Jewish education. Thank you, Marc.
Thank you. And it's my honor to introduce Dr. Esty Gross, who I actually get to work with on a pretty regular basis through things like Pritzat Derech and the work that we do at Prisma with Hebrew at the Center. So this is one of those opportunities when we all know each other really well, so it's a lot of fun to be on a panel together. So I'm really blessed to be a part of this conversation. Dr. Esty Gross is an educator with over 25 years in Hebrew and second language instruction and curriculum development. She is currently the Chief of Staff and Director of Education at Hebrew at the Center and a visiting lecturer at Delit Hebrew Teaching Program at Hebrew Union College. Previously, she was the Education Director for Hebrew Studies in CET's Global Division, a leader in Hebrew curriculum and Jewish education worldwide. Dr. Gross has held various leadership roles, including Adjunct Professor of Mathematics Program at USC, Associate Coordinator of the Delit Ivrit, and key positions in Los Angeles Jewish Day Schools. She has co-chaired the National Association of Hebrew Teachers, contributed to the Council for Hebrew Language and Culture in North America, presented widely and authored several articles on equitable second language education, and authored and co-authored Hebrew textbooks. Dr. Gross holds a doctorate in educational leadership from USC, an MA in management and leadership and education from Tel Aviv University, a master teacher certificate from Hebrew College, and a BA in English linguistics with a teaching diploma from Bar Ilan University, which is why she's so awesome at everything that she does.
And now we'll have Rabbi Marc Wolf begin.
Great. So
Yeah,
I'm going to
that's-
share my screen and some slides. I'm first going to sort of give the rundown of sort of where we're going to go today. Through our agenda, we're going to first start talking about sort of the teacher pipeline challenge Big Adol, sort of on the field-wide level that I'm going to lead. Then Sarah's going to do some solutions and strategies from a head of school. Esty is going to lead us in a conversation about research-based solutions, the impact of professional development, and then we're going to have some reflections and open discussion for the rest of us. So I'm starting off with the teacher pipeline challenge. So at Prisma, we're very focused on the strengthening the pipeline of Jewish day school educators, and we've had a growing concern over the last number of years, both within sort of across the board and when it comes to recruiting, training, and retaining talented educators. This definitely holds true for Hebrew language instructors as well, but I think it is across the board for general studies, for Jewish studies, and it is an issue that is actually reflected throughout the course of education at this point. And even if you sort of telescope out, it's actually something that's shared across a lot of the nonprofit fields in terms of getting good talent to come into the field. But we're focused today specifically on Jewish educators and specifically Hebrew language instructors as well. I think the conversation that we held at Prisma over the past year is remarkably relevant to this. So, but first I want to ask the question, what do we mean when we talk about the pipeline of educators? Are we talking about sort of just bringing people in young? Like, are we talking about just increasing the number of educators that we have in our schools when we're talking about Hebrew language instructors? Or are we talking about just we need a lot more Hebrew teachers? Yes. But when we stepped back at Prisma and thought about this question, we actually saw a much broader pipeline when it came down to it. The pipeline we saw as extending not only from the very beginning of getting more people in and elevating the profile of what it was to become a Jewish educator, but actually all the part of this which covers the entire arc of the career. So for us, this became a question of all of these aspects of it. First, thinking about early pipeline. How do we inspire young people to come into careers in Jewish day school education? How do we inspire people to want to become Hebrew teachers? A lot of that rests on the idea of elevating the profile of Jewish educator. You know, when we come down to it, there's a question that I love to ask people. Who was the last person that you said, you know what, you should really be a teacher? This was a conversation that I like to have wherever I go, questions that I like to pose to friends in my community and say, if we are not elevating the profile of Jewish educators, saying to our children and to the children in our schools, this is something that you should consider, they're not going to consider it. And in order to be able to do that, we need to make it a respected profession. We need to make it something that people can aspire to when they look into a classroom, they see a teacher and they say, you know what, that's what I want to do for my life. Next, we need to recruit and train qualified educators into the system. This is the third pillar of the pipeline that we think about. And this is really about making sure that they can be successful when they enter the classroom. It involves pedagogic training, it involves content knowledge, and the two of those need to be fused together in order for somebody to be successful in a classroom. Whether that's master's programs, teaching certificates, all of the different degrees that Esty has, like all of these things are things that contribute to being successful in a classroom. And they're skills that you actually need to focus on over the course of your career. So a lot of these pillars of this pipeline are not things that are solely at one particular moment, but actually stem the arc of an entire career. Next, we need to create the environment in schools where teachers can succeed. This involves like new teacher induction programs, making sure that they have mentoring. You know, I think out of many careers, teaching is probably the one with the most where you can go through as much training as you would possibly have, but the first moment that you walk into a classroom, you say, oh, this is what this career is about. And as much content knowledge, as much pedagogic training that you have, you need the supportive system of a school around you in order to be able to be successful. You need to make sure that people are helping you fail forward because of the number of teachers who get burned out within those first 3 years because they confront something that they're not necessarily prepared for or not supported around. Next is ongoing professional development. And this is investing in both content knowledge and pedagogic training over the course of your career. You know, chas v'shalom, we don't want people to go into a career and think, oh, you know what I learned on day one? I'm just going to keep doing that for the entire rest of my career. For a number of reasons. Number one, content changes. The way that we think about it changes. You know, as much as we might be teaching the traditional texts of our religion, the way that those are taught, the perceptions of those keep changing over the course, and you need to keep yourself fresh. We don't want somebody to be in the classroom for 35 years and be doing the same lesson every single time. We want them to invest in it and think, wow, how am I growing as a professional? How am I growing as a teacher in this? What am I investing in the way that I'm showing up in the classroom, and how am I making this different for my students on an ongoing basis? And finally, is investing in the arc of the career of an educator. And this is, I think, one of the key pieces right now, because we tend to, in the education systems, reward good teachers with administrative positions. Now, this is not, you know, not a knock on Sarah at all. Sarah's an amazing head of school. We want people to become school leaders, and that can definitely be an arc of a career. But we also want to reward the teachers who are excellent in the classroom and try to keep them in the classroom as much as we can. Whatever we can do to do that, if it's creating different roles for them, creating mentorship opportunities, but to really when somebody sort of finishes their career as an educator, to look back and say, I had a career as an educator, not just that I came in and I taught a class every single day for the last 35 years. I want to take a moment and express my gratitude to the Jewish Education Innovative Challenge, JEIC. Sharon Freundel and I, over the past year or so, led a working group of people to sort of focus on these 6 aspects of the pipeline. I'm going to talk about that process for a little bit. But Sharon and I, at the 2019 Prisma Conference in Atlanta, Georgia, brought together a group of people to think about what we were going to start doing about the pipeline of educators. Sharon and I have been talking about it for a while. We've been good partners on this. And what we decided to do was pull together 30 people to think through this issue over the course of a year. Of course, people have been thinking about the teacher pipeline. Of course, people have been thinking about what we could do to strengthen that pipeline. And a lot of that's been happening on the organizational level, on the school level, on the communal level, and people, you know, as we like to say, making their own Shabbos. What we wanted to do was bring together as many people in the cross-section of the field that we could to have the conversation together. And this group met about 2 times over the course of a year, 2 times a month over the course of a year, in a highly facilitated conversation to really sort of dive in to each one of those pillars of the pipeline. We split the group up into those 6 different pillars, and we had some time together as a group. They did breakout sessions together, and we had representatives from all of these organizations that you're seeing here on the screen, from federations and BJEs to foundations, from a nice representation from Jewish day schools, partner organizations, training programs in graduate schools, academic educational research, youth organizations, really thinking about what we could do to bring as many people around the table who had been having this conversation themselves, and to do it all together. I think one of the greatest byproducts of this conversation was the relationships that were fused during the course of this year of working together. This working group of about 30 people has now gone off to do things themselves together, and to focus and take what we've learned throughout the course of the pipeline project and apply it in their work. So what we did was we brought those 30 people together, and along with JEIC, we created this Jewish Day School Pipeline Working Group. We had an assessment phase where we try to understand the field's current reality through strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats, conversations, and field mapping. What's working out there? What are things that people have been doing on all aspects and levels of that pipeline that are working, that we want to think about elevating, that we want to say, shine a bright light on and say, here's a bright spot in the field. We need to think about how we might replicate this in other places. An exploration phase, review the past and existing efforts and brainstorm opportunities of things that might grow out of this work. And finally, a planning phase where we decided to vet and determine ideas worth pursuing and create an action plan to bring them to life. What that then resulted in was a number of questions that we were considering. How do we get young people to think about becoming educators? How might compensation and benefits better reflect the value of Jewish day school educators provide to the communities? How might we provide pathways to teaching beyond traditional master's programs? How might we create a healthy, supportive school cultures? You can see each one of these lines up to those individual pillars of that pipeline that I showed from the slides a couple of slides ago. How might we shift school structures and mindset to enable a culture of learning and growth? And finally, how might we ensure educators are adequately resourced for the demands that they faced? These are some of the questions that emerged from each one of those pipeline working groups. And from these questions, we dove in and began to identify what are some things that could grow out of this process that would be opportunities to invest in the pipeline, that would be opportunities to invest throughout the course of the field. We ended up creating a number of different things as deliverables. First, we had a summary report that details everything that we do, and there's a QR code on the screen. If you scan that, I hope it should bring you to the website where you can see both the summary report and the second deliverable, which is our pipeline playbook. I'm going to talk about that one in a second, but we also published an issue of Hayidion, the Prisma journal, that focused on the educator pipeline. So in that, you see a lot of people from the field, including a strong representation from our working group who wrote different articles for that issue of Hayidion. And finally, the piece that we've talked about is sort of the Jewish Day School Educator Pipeline Playbook. There were 36 ideas that sort of emerged from the working group that we saw as opportunities to invest on 3 levels: on a field level, on a school, on a community level, and on a school level, of things that could be put in play that would strengthen the teacher pipeline at any one of those different phases of the pipeline, and any one of those 6 pillars that we talked about. Now, we didn't come out with a whole group of proposals that we were going to throw to the field. We haven't gone to like national funders and said, this is the silver bullet that is going to solve the teacher pipeline in Jewish day schools. Because out of all of our conversations together as a working group, what emerged was, you know what, things are going to be different depending upon the context. And a lot of this needs to be focused on the community level or on the school level to actually find solutions that are going to matter. There happens to be a tendency in a lot of what happens in the Jewish communal space is like, let's look at the big, bold idea that's going to transform the entire world. This group was focused on really affecting serious change. So we called it a playbook because if you take a look at it, there are a few bullet points for every single one of the initiatives, of the 36 initiatives that emerged from the working group. They're bullet points. They are not saying this is how to do it. It's saying this is how this might play out in your community. This is how this might play out in your school. This is how it might play out locally for you. And how can you take that and apply it to your own individual setting? So 36 ideas is a lot, you know, to come out of a group. And now we're moved on to phase 2, where sort of working with the field, the community, and schools to do 4 things. Number 1, become a catalyst for ideas. How can we use what emerged from this pipeline working group and make it a catalyst for ideas that are going to emerge on the community level, on the school level, and on the field-wide level? What can we do to sort of have those conversations? I spend a lot of my time in conversations with people who sort of thinking about this level. How can Prisma, how can we be a thought partner with others who are thinking through, you know what? One of the big ideas that emerges is sort of a teacher incubator program that people call fellows programs that happen in schools, where schools bring in people in college and graduate school and have them work as assistant teachers or within the day school context to introduce them, give them a little bit of training and wet their whistle on what it might feel like to be a Jewish day school teacher. One of the things that we've learned from all the research that we've done is that if you give somebody a taste of what it is to be teaching in a Jewish day school, if you give somebody a taste of what it means to go to a Jewish day school, they love it. And we end up keeping them. So that does for parents as well as for teachers. So in this, we're a thought partner to help people build things. We're a design partner in a number of fellows programs and other things that are happening out there to actually say, all right, what's going to happen and what's going to work in your school? Let's identify some of the issues that are at play that might be impacting or negatively impacting the teacher pipeline in your school. How can we help design something with you? I've got a piece of work that I'm going to be launching relatively soon to work with an entire community of schools. And finally, how can we be a good network connector? What's working well here that we think also might work there, and have people learn from each other? All too often, a lot of what happened in the teacher pipeline has not been documented. It's not been triumphed. It's not been celebrated, the things that have worked. And so there isn't a good repository of, oh, look, this worked well over there. We think it might work well over here. So the role that we at Prisma are playing is being a network connector, as we do with all of our work. And looking to see what we can do to elevate all the different ideas. I'm going to stop sharing my screen there. And Esty, do you want to take questions now, or do you want to wait till the end?
I think wait till the end, right,
Great.
Rabbi?
All right. Then I'm going to pass it off to Sarah.
Hold on, hold on. 1 second. Now I just closed out of the presentation. Hold on 1 second, everybody. So while I'm pulling up the presentation, I'll just say that what Marc shared is so true, that the context and the system really matters. And I think what's true at a national level is also true in a school systems level. And so part of what I want to share with you is about what it is to run a school that does a good job sort of bringing in and holding on to really excellent teachers. It's both about the Hebrew program and it's about the larger context of the school overall. Okay, now I have it pulled up again. All right, so diving in, to give you a sense of our context, our specific context, because what Marc was saying about it's not so like plug and play. You can't, what works in Los Angeles may or may not work in other communities. So just to give you a sense of the context that we are operating in, we are a fairly large community middle and high school, grades 6 through 12. We have about 530 families. About 10% of them come from Hebrew-speaking homes. I think the other thing that's really relevant to looking at these statistics is that when you think about where our kids are coming from, for many middle and high schools, Jewish middle and high schools, kids are coming out of Jewish day schools. That used to be true at Milken. It is now no longer totally true. Nearly 50% of kids are coming from either secular private schools or public school. So that means that coming into us, their exposure to Hebrew is pretty limited and often doesn't exist at all. Okay. Another piece of context that I think is really important is that the school as a whole has a very Hebrew-rich environment. And I think that's sort of an extremely important piece of what it means to be able to pull in, train, and hold on to excellent Hebrew educators, is that if it only exists in the Hebrew department 2 to 3 times a week, it isn't really going to permeate. And I don't think you get your teachers feeling like that their work is a valued part of the fabric of the school overall. So we made, there's a lot of intention around Hebrew everywhere. So just as an example, we have 7 core values. Our core values are actually first in Hebrew and then in English. And when we talk about them with kids, we always use the Hebrew word. It's very much in the dialogue and sort of the vocabulary of our school. So we do a week of programming around Martin Luther King Week, but instead of calling it like diversity and inclusion, we call it arevut, which is the core value, and we use the Hebrew word. Also signage, there's signage everywhere in Hebrew. So it's on our huge banners as you pull into campus. It's on the walls of our middle school. There's both Hebrew and English. It's in everything we produce, our website, our admission material. It's on doors. It's on the Garin MIT Fab Lab. So Hebrew is really integrated into what you see as you walk around our campus. That often is organic. So we have had teacher initiatives where they have wanted different values and sayings in Hebrew to be more present on campus. So one of our Hebrew teachers actually worked with kids and organized that initiative around campus. We very intentionally integrate Hebrew into faculty and student speeches. So in spite of being very self-conscious about my own expressive Hebrew, it's really important that whenever I speak, I always use Hebrew in whatever I say. I practice it with my own Milken students, whose Hebrew is excellent, and get a lot of critical feedback on that work. But our students also, when we put up our representatives of student government, our athletes, we always are integrating Hebrew into what they say. So it's just part of the vibe of the school. A couple of years ago, Carmi Burstein, who I'll talk about in a moment, launched a Hebrew course for teachers, and she started teaching our teachers. Many of them are not Jewish, so that our teachers, and now she did a beginner class, now she's doing an intermediate class. So again, the kids are seeing the value of Hebrew language everywhere they go, and she would practice with them outside. So And we actually videoed much of it and then would circulate it to our parent body. Our parents this year requested a Hebrew language course, and one of our teachers is teaching a parent course in Hebrew. Lots of times at our beginner level or our higher level, the authentic assessment that kids do is in Hebrew for many people in the school, even those people whose Hebrew isn't so strong. So just as an example, we have a social science teacher who lived in Israel for a period of time, who's an archaeologist. She came in, she delivered a lecture about archaeology in Hebrew, and then the kids had to ask her questions. There's a lot of ongoing a sort of effort to bring in people who aren't in the Hebrew department into the work of Hebrew language instruction in the school. Something I'm really proud of, and I didn't have time to show it, but I can share it afterwards, is every year, one of our 4 student speeches at graduation is in Hebrew. And I think I'm really proud of it because it's not always our Hebrew language speakers who deliver that speech. And they work with one of our teachers to make sure that not only like the word for word translation, but that the sort of meaning of language is expressed in what they say. Last year, for the first time, the person who gave the speech gave it and did his own translation into Hebrew, which I thought was pretty incredible, and then ran it by the Hebrew language instructor. That's just a piece of the biggest picture context. And I think it really plays into attracting and retaining teachers. They understand that their work isn't only about what they do in the classroom. An overlapping area, obviously, is Israel education. We've also really ramped up our Israel programming in Israel education. And what's the best way of reinforcing Hebrew language? Actually being in Israel and having to use it. So instead of only going once to Israel, our kids actually go 3 different times. There are leadership opportunities in those programs that they can stay an additional week as well. Okay, so I think, if I were to make a recommendation of one place to invest, if you're really trying to up the profile of Hebrew language at your school, it's in leadership, and we have the absolute best. I think that Andrew, Marc, and Esty all know Carmit really well. Carmit is our Hebrew instructional leader. We specifically called it instructional leader instead of department chair because the focus is on the instruction. She is an absolute master teacher. She actually teaches 2 of my own children, so I can tell you that both as a parent and as a head of school. We send all of our teachers into her classroom to watch her teach, even those who are not language instructors, because her pedagogy is so incredible. And she has such a passion for what she does and such a professionalism that it sets the bar for what we do overall. Okay. She has really helped us professionalize our department in terms of setting standards for our new teachers and their training. 100% of our teachers hired in the past 5 years have at least a BA degree. She insists that they all complete the Delet LeIvrit program at HUC. It's a comprehensive course that's really about second language instruction. And then she meets weekly every new teacher meets weekly with her to really focus on unit design and lesson plans. So it's a significant investment on the part of the teacher and the school in professional development, both internally and externally, but it's very worth it. And then from a retention perspective, and this is, I think, my assumption about Jewish educators and really all educators is they want to keep learning. That's one of the things that I think keeps us all motivated in the field. And so we invest a significant amount, not only in our new teacher PD, but our ongoing teacher PD. Every newer teacher, so not only first-year teachers, meet with Carmit to brainstorm and develop interactive units. They really focus on all educational approaches, traditional, progressive, and critical. Our veteran teachers meet with her bi-weekly, and they talk about their annual goals, and they really focus on methods to achieve their goal. And then every department meeting, which happens about every other week, it's not only like the logistics of what needs to get done, it's dedicated professional development time. And I think one of the things that I've watched Carmit do really successfully is empower the members of her department to run their own professional development sessions. So that too has also been, I think, a key part of retaining teachers. The other piece is really financial commitment on the part of the school. And I recognize that in Los Angeles and at Milken, we're very lucky for 2 reasons. We're in a huge metropolitan area with 700,000 Jews. So much easier to recruit and retain really excellent Hebrew language instructors or teachers overall. And also, we are in a school system with tremendous resources. But what I would advise is, if you want your Hebrew and Jewish studies and sort of Jewish teacher pipeline to be robust, just like when you look at the budgeting, you say where you spend your money is what you value. So that is also true in teachers and teacher salaries. So when we look at our highest paid teachers and highest paid instructional leaders, it's always in Hebrew and Jewish studies. And I think, we know very clearly those areas aren't excellent. Like, why aren't they at the school down the street? So we've made a really conscious effort, both at a board level and at a management level, to make sure that we're investing in the salaries and benefits of all of our teachers, but in particular, our Hebrew teachers and Jewish educators. Okay, I'm going to stop so we can sort of zoom out and talk about research overall, and Esty will take us through that.
Thank you very much, Sarah. I think my part will actually mirror a lot and echo a lot of what Sarah said, of what you're doing based on the research and based on the framework we're going to share. I think everything touching about all the check points of what the research recommends. And really the key is professional development. So let me end the support, obviously, of the leadership to make this happen. So what we know from research that is not specific just to Hebrew education, just to general language education, dual language, is that to find dual language teachers who are proficient and highly qualified is the single, most important and difficult challenge in building an effective language program. And as Sarah, as you said at the end, that actually the Jewish studies and Hebrew teachers are the highest paid in the school, I guess, is because we know how challenging it is. And not every school is doing that, so kol hakavod. And I think before, to talk about solutions without talking about the challenges themselves and without talking about the root causes for those challenges, I think would be, we need to talk about that before we talk about the solutions, so we can then strengthen what we're doing in the field. So some of the challenges, they're not new. We're just, organizing them and sharing, is the loss of human capital in general in education, and more specifically in Jewish education, and more specifically with Hebrew, is the recent accelerators are retirement. The COVID caused a lot of people to retire or to go back to Israel. Hebrew teachers went back to Israel. The war in Israel, which caused a lot of the emissaries, shlichim, morim shlichim, whether to go back and support Israel in the fight, in the war, or some of them who were about to leave to come were held back, or whether they decided not to come or couldn't come for personal reasons. So this is huge. Out of 170, I think, shlichim who were supposed to come this year, only 90 were able to, which is huge. And at the same time, there's increased enrollment, in the Jewish day schools due to whether it's the pandemic, or we saw because of the rising anti-Semitism in public schools or in independent secular schools. So we have larger classes with more diversity, both in terms of cultural knowledge about Jewishness, but also about their level of Hebrew. And within those classes, not every school is fortunate, right, Sarah, to have so many levels, both for incoming, for existing school students. So many of the teachers in the field that we've been working with, report that they have more than the natural diversity in the classroom in terms of Hebrew proficiency. And because of students coming with no Hebrew skills, and yet they need to attend to them, or increased need for differentiated instruction. And the assumed causes, I think, undermining the retention is due to those challenges, right? Some of those challenges, teachers, Hebrew teachers in particular, their load increases. They either teach more classes or they need to attend to more types of students. And some of them don't feel valued, even though we say post now October 7th, their place in the school is more prominent and there's a focus on them, yet many of the teachers receive low salaries. They're either part-time, so their status at the school is not, they don't feel part of the faculty. The Hebrew class in some of the schools has turned to an elective, or there's less instructional time versus other core subjects, which affects, actions speak louder than words, affects the perception of parents, students, and community about Hebrew. And some of that causes lack of low job satisfaction, meaning when there's also lack, we'll look at that, clear goals of why to teach Hebrew. Teachers may think they should be doing this, but actually the administration or parents want something else and they're confused. Like, we're doing so much work to advance at one aspect of Hebrew, but you're expected us to do something else, and then they feel that they're not doing a good job, right? So, and there's also, this is major, lack of time to plan and reflect. Meaning, Sarah, you mentioned that you have every other week, I think, a department meeting, and that's something that it's a school-wide thing. It's not just for Hebrew, but some schools may not have that even in general for their faculty, which is surprising as part of the culture of the school, but some of them won't have time for Hebrew teachers to meet separately than with the faculty. So, and we know that that's needed for personal and professional growth. So the key solutions have to do with teachers feeling supported emotionally and instructionally by the administration, by the middle management, and so on. And they need to feel that they're growing. I think, Marc, you addressed that every teacher who feels that they're growing and learning, they fall in love with, right, teaching and all that. And that is something that we know that needs to be ongoing. Now, in order for part of the solution, Andrew came, right, Rabbi Dr. Andrew Ergas, suggested this framework of, and this is also supported by, obviously, research, to set clear goals and realistic expectations. And I'll address that a little bit more. Recognition of success and achievement. Resourcing the vision. You can't do everything on your own. Hebrew is a school-wide responsibility, and we heard that from Sarah, that it's not just the Hebrew teachers, it goes beyond. It's the signage, it's the in assemblies, in graduation, and so on, and support for teachers to be successful ongoing. So I'll try to unpack. I'm looking at the time, and I think I have the time, so I'm going to try to unpack some of those things. Feel free to, Andrew, let me know if I need to move along. So in terms of clear goals and realistic expectations, this is really, really important. Maybe in math, there's a clear goal of where students, and clear benchmarks and standards, and in English the same, maybe in science. In Hebrew, teachers have multiple goals to juggle, and every school has emphasis on different, on maybe all of these goals in a different way. Modern Hebrew language learning, we want students to make meaning of sacred text, Jewish living skills to be part of the community, and we want affective goals such as Israel engagement, language, and we want them to love the language because it's the language of the Jewish people, and to enjoy it, to feel the joy of it. And that's a lot to expect right, of a Hebrew teacher if they don't have all the support, all the training of how to do this. And we see here from Ross of Consulting that students, parents, and teachers have put emphasis on the goals that we talked about, but they have different expectations of what they want out of the Hebrew experience at the school. You could see that the students want more the Hebrew that helps them when they visit Israel, whereas we see teachers thinking about how they connect to Israel or that's a unique skill to have, and parents value the connection to Jews around the world and so on. And these are slightly different, and they reflect really slightly different practices and instructional approaches. So each ideology, if the emphasis on the joy or love or engagement, that is slightly different than being very proficient and feeling comfortable and conversant in Hebrew on the streets at the end of their school experience. So understanding that these are sometimes competing, yes, they're complementing, but they may be competing goals, and how to help teachers focus and understand what is the importance of Hebrew at your school. So that needs to be reflected in the Hebrew mission and vision very clearly, in the vision of the Hebrew graduate articulated there, and this can inform teachers in their instruction and therefore make them more successful at what they do. Clear goals, realistic expectations, having a scope and sequence. I know, Sarah, at your school, for example, they're working on it right now to revise, to update constantly so it aligns right with the mission and vision. And the instructional framework you mentioned, right, the traditional progressive critical approach. So if teachers are able to verbalize, right, what is the approach that they're using, that strengthens their self-efficacy, the way they see themselves as professionals as well, and that impacts their practice. Key effective classroom practices stem from the instructional framework that is clear to them. Curriculum selection and design, not just selecting curriculum, but knowing why are we choosing this material versus why something else is not, will not take us there, is important to have those kind of discussions. So when we say professional development, I want to be clear what that really means. It's more intricate and detailed, maybe versus other core subjects at the school. And we need, as we know, ongoing opportunities for feedback and reflection about instruction and beyond. And all that is also synthesized in this competencies framework that was developed at Hebrew at the Center with support of other scholars and researchers and practitioners in the field. And that encompasses the 4 areas that we think the research shows that a professional, qualified Hebrew teacher, in order for them to be successful, they need to have knowledge and skills in those 4 areas. And within that, we have outlined competencies, specific competencies that really frame the professional development that should be offered. And teachers, when hired, whether they're new, veteran, we can then look at this and say, where are their strengths? Where do they need more help with or support with or more knowledge? And so this allows us to actually measure and know what kind of support to provide. It's not just random. Also, we know from research that it's not enough to teach teachers about best practices. Oftentimes they need the actual tachlis ways of how to do this. And this is where the curriculum comes in. And it's great that we are now versus 20 years ago in the field where we didn't have many of the curricula that we have today. But having them, as we said, knowing our vision, mission, and instructional approach helps then teachers need help and support with selection of material that to help them see how, whether it aligns or not with where the school wants the students to get to or achieve in terms of Hebrew. So we have in one of the State of the Field, I think 2 years ago, we have collected and curated all the list and a little bit of overview about each of those. And that's something that we also help schools with the curriculum selection. So another way to elevate, right, teachers' self-efficacy and seeing them as successful at the school and what they're doing and elevating the status of Hebrew at your school is recognizing success and achievement of students. By recognizing the success of students, we're actually recognizing the byproduct is recognizing teachers' work and investment, and we're celebrating them as well. And some of the ways is to, as I think, Sarah, you mentioned, again, graduation is a great place where there's a graduation speech, but there's also when they walk, right, they can wear some kind, whatever tassel or to reflect or anything. So having the global seal of biliteracy, for example, and having the badge or having something that they can add to their resume or and participate also in a ceremony, whether in school, whether at the Heseg, which is a general ceremony that we are doing at Hebrew at the Center, usually in January and the day of the Yom HaSafa Ivrit, where we celebrate all those students nationally that have achieved a global seal of biliteracy, marking their proficiency as intermediate, mid, and above, meaning they achieved the ability to converse in Hebrew, which is, and this is the example. I hope we could see a little bit of the ceremony here. I don't know if we can hear. Hello? Or maybe soon. Yeah. Can you hear anything or not yet? Not yet. Okay, let me share again with some. What sound?
אני אוהב לדבר עברית כי אני אוהב ישראל ולדבר עברית עם האנשים שגרים בישראל.
I will stop here. This is just a real snippet of the Heseg ceremony, and kids and families and teachers and administrators are so proud once they're there to be celebrated. And I hope that all of our students will eventually take part of this. And then the final piece is resourcing the vision. What do we mean by that? Is financial support, meaning funds to get the high quality materials, funds to provide professional development, differentiated professional development, both for new teachers and for veterans. As Sarah said, it is different, but we need to remember that sending teachers to a training, to a one-off, or even to month-long or a year-long even to the Del Livrit or the online courses that we offer at Hebrew at the Center with Hebrew College is not sufficient. They need sort of like an induction, like another year, and then another year and another year. So it doesn't end. And we need to offer them competitive salaries. So that's a financial investment. Also time. Do not forget, sometimes schools are so eager to provide professional development. They get the funds, but then there's no time. There's no time for teachers to actually meet and reflect and plan, and also not just within their department, but across departments, right? Interdisciplinary or with other schools as well, to sort of, and we need time. And I understand time is a very expensive commodity in education. And also human resources. We need the right-sized faculty, not to overburden the teachers with 7 classes, different levels, and all that. And to get also the Hebrew leadership, similarly to what Sarah, you have a great Hebrew instructional leader, and cultivating that and making that possible as a position. Lastly, the political resourcing of making sure there's advocacy for Hebrew within your community stakeholders. Marc, you mentioned the idea of field, community, school. So the school shouldn't take that on their own. They should, right? It's not on the school itself, but it's also working with the local federations, JCCs, and so on, to make sure that Hebrew is on a prominent agenda of everyone. And here at Hebrew at the Center, finally, I want to say that we offer those kinds of supports for the fields, for the community, and for the school, and then from the individual, the department, and the individual teacher. We offer it through various ways, which you can find on this link, or in another time I could put it in the chat. I would like us now to reflect a little, just to think, going back to this framework of where is your school vis-a-vis those areas of solutions? What are you doing well? What do you think you need to do better? And now, after hearing Marc, after hearing Sarah, right, and some of our ideas now, what can you do better? And this is something to think about, and maybe also we'd like to open it up for discussion, right? And if you have any other suggestions that maybe we didn't mention, we'd love to hear and add them when we speak, in the future with other stakeholders. And maybe Marc can add it to his playbook, Prisma playbook. Shelly, bevakasha.
Hi, everyone. It's nice to see you. Some of you I know, some of you are new to me. I work at Charles C. Smith Jewish Day School at Maryland. I'm also a doctoral candidate in Middlebury and teaching the MA course in Middlebury. So I have a little bit of vision, and I see a lot of teachers, and me coming from the field itself gives me a little bit of knowledge of also what's going on the ground. So one thing that I've heard all of you speak, and first of all, I really am impressed, and I thank you for thinking of how we can promote Hebrew leadership, Hebrew teachers, how to put Hebrew in the center, in other words, professionally and in education in general. What I want to add to this conversation is another lens that I hear a lot from other teachers, and that is we'll call it maybe the cultural gap. So when I say cultural gap, is on one hand, the schools and the systems and organization are importing, we can say that, Hebrew teachers, shlichim, Israeli faculty into their schools because they want to see the Hebrew in their schools. That's on one hand. On the other hand is how they receive or accept the Israeli cultures in their institute. And that is something I think worth mentioning and thinking about, and how teachers, and especially new teachers, are being brought into those schools and organizations, and how the school support their Israeli culture, not only because they want to bring it to the school, because there is a culture gap there. And the school wants to have the Israeli culture, but at some point, I think it draw a line between what is the culture, what aspect of the culture they want to receive, and what they don't want to receive. And I think that's worth mentioning. That's one thing. Another question that I want to put out there, or wonder that I would like to just throw in there, is a lot of teachers are asking me, well, I'll be a teacher. How many years am I going to be a teacher? What is my professional horizon here? How many, did anyone ever check how many Israeli faculty have moved into leadership roles? I think that's really important to think about. That's also a statement about Israeli culture being real part of the schools. So I just want to throw it out there. I know, Esty, I think when Ivry, the center, sent a survey, I think one of the questions was your professional development, but I think one of the questions should be also in there, or maybe it's just an idea. Where do you see yourself develop in 5 years, in 10 years? Do you see any horizon to where you're at? So I just wanted
thank you.
to.
Absolutely, thank you.
Can I share?
Before
Shalom. Hi, how are you? My name is Omri Sheikh. I'm the managing director of Hebrew and Israeli Studies in the Hebrew Public Charter School. Hello, everyone. But before I came to that beautiful position, I was a principal, K to 12 in a public school in New York. Not dealing with all other subjects, not necessarily the school that I was principal at didn't focus on Hebrew or Israeli culture. So that was a shift for me. For when I'm saying shift, I'm familiar with the needs and what they were. Shelley just mentioned the culture gap, right? Especially when we're talking about shlichim, what they bringing, how is the educational system here in US far different than Israel, the expectation, let alone if we're talking about shlichim, there is another aspect of leaving their country, moving on to a different country where they need to deal with the finance, when they need to deal with the climate, friends, family, everything is different. And let alone they need to come to show up to work every day, and there is that culture, right? So where is the support fits in? So that's something where, because of the transition, my personal transition from a public school into Hebrew, which Hebrew Public as a managing director, I can provide a support and identify, similar to what you shared and what Shelley also mentioned, where is the cultural gap, where they need the support. I also want to mention that the pipeline, yes, I love when you share that recruiting, training, and retaining those focus points. Something that we used to do is, and I believe you mentioned it, Rabbi Marc, about fellows teachers. We used to call a teacher assistant, bring them in, getting also almost a stage or different type of salary arc when it comes to pipeline. The teacher assistant stage 1 up to 4. It's also aligned where how far they are from gaining the certification, and then eventually implementing them in the classroom. So that's also an excellent idea. So I just want to share that. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else would like to add maybe what you're doing or what we should be doing to encourage our Hebrew teachers to join us and stay?
Hi, so I'm Daniela Friedman. I work with Shelley. Well, Shelley is the middle school and upper school. I'm the lower school at Charles Jewish State School. Sarah, whatever you described, we're doing. our core value in Hebrew and his sandwiches in Hebrew and students we have a SIUM in 5th grade. We are pre-K to 5th, and Shelley takes them from 6 to 12. In the SIUM, about a third of the students speak in Hebrew. I mean, really, Hebrew has a very strong presence in our school, thanks to the head of school, Mitch Malkus, as well as, all our staff, very committed. I think one of the issues actually that, Shelley, I don't know if you see, is the amount of teaching time that you have and what the scope and sequence and how much you want to achieve in order to have those students have communicative language and Judaic studies, if it's Tanakh, if it's Hagim, and so on. It's like there's not enough time. Meanwhile, they really have to master the core subjects of English. And that's a struggle I face with my team every single day. How do you, with the amount of time, we are 40-60 school, and this year we went back to the real 40-60. With the years, we inched into more like a 50-50, and the time allotment is hard. It's hard how you achieve that, we do the Avant every year, and I'm really proud of our results. But in order to get there, you need time to teach. And that's one issue. And the other issue, which I find, I don't know, there are not a lot of us here, but the issue of kids with learning disabilities and learning challenges. And I think the field has not yet found an answer for that. It's like how you make them proud of knowing what they know. With the limited, if it's dyslexia, which I'm looking forward to Scott Goldberg session. If it's retrieval, is the challenge of first language. Now you ask them to learn Hebrew. I think this is one of my goals, as long as I'm in my job, is like to find something for all those kids with all those learning disabilities and all those challenges to still be proud and master the level of proficiency level we're looking at our school. So this is, I think that's a big issue.
Thank you, Daniela. And Rabbi, you want to close?
Yeah, first of all, thank you all of you for joining this session. We've recorded it. We look forward to sharing it with the field. A huge thank you to Sarah, to Marc, to Esty for bringing their expertise and wisdom and organizing this. I think a big takeaway is that one of the most important pathways to good recruitment is really strong retention and elevating the individuals you already have on your team. We tomorrow during the State of the Field session, we'll be presenting the results of the research we did on salaries and benefits, which we think is a key component of this, especially when tied to the research that's been done on professional learning as an important component of teacher retention. We all have a short break. We'll be rejoining in the main plenary for a cultural session where there will be a wonderful interview with Maya Arad. That will begin sharply at 8:45 in Jerusalem, which is how most of us set our clocks, at 1:45 for those of you on the East Coast, and at 10:45 for those of you coming in from the West Coast. Thank you all.
תודה רבה. תודה רבה, מרק. תודה רבה, שרה. תודה רבה לכולם. להתראות.